Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me for an abbreviated preview edition of the podcast as we do round 20 previews for the Flegg Cup and Harvey Women's Premiership is my good mate Sixties. And I say it's a preview podcast, big fella, but we're also going to throw in a little bit of an Origin-free recap because that was a spicy contest last night. Blues prevailing for just the third time in the history in a game free decider up in Queensland. So we'll talk about that shortly. But first, as always, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. I've been up to Eels training today. It was a hive of activity up there on one of the fields. They had a kids' school holidays footy clinic that was going on. I would imagine some of the Eels players would have been heading up there after they finished their training session. I went and watched the training session. It involved actually the Jet squad. So the young players who have been identified as the future stars of the club, ones that they're going to put a lot of development into. They were involved in training drills and a bit of exposure to what it means to train at an NRL level. So that was interesting to watch there. You'll probably see some photos that come out on Eels media about it. What I will say is the first grade players, they really do embrace the younger players coming through and make them feel welcome. And Gutho, I do have to give him props as a captain because the way that he was driving reminders for them out there, it was just, he was truly the captain out there in the session with them. So that was good to see. So yeah, a good morning, mate. And it's but of course we do have that horrible news that we've got with Mitch Moses. You've said it to me many times, mate. At Parramatta, we're not allowed to have nice things. We're not allowed to have good things.
It honestly feels like it, doesn't it? Between the grand finals that we've either bungled or had stolen from us, between all the promising seasons that have been derailed, between just seasons like this where it's just been misery. We don't get to have nice things. We don't.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch Moses, you'd have to say he's at the peak of his powers right now. And he's at the peak of his powers in what is the season from hell for us. We could rattle off what the injury list looks like at the moment, the casualty ward at Parramatta, but he now joins a list of people who, next to their name with the injury, reads the word season. And it's too many. It involves significant players. We're going to get to the end of the season and we're going to see next to Mitch Moses' name in the records will be 8 games. That will be his total appearances for Parramatta in 2024. And it's, unfortunately, it's been just one of those years. I thought last year was bad enough. This year just absolutely takes the cake. And of course, it's a mixture of, stuff where the club can look in the mirror and work out why it went wrong. And then you just know if you're having a bad year, everything just piles on. And injuries just have been part of the recipe for a stink bomb of a season. That's just how it is.
Yes, sir. All right, let's talk some football. But before that, as always, a quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan, and Parramatta. Much love to Greg and the crew for supporting TCT. Let's do the Origin free recap. We spoke about the injury to Mitchell Moses. It is a ruptured bicep at the elbow rather than the shoulder connector, which is the more conventional rupturing of the bicep, which means he's looking at, and this has got a bit of variance based on the individual 60s, but anywhere from sort of 7 to 12 weeks, I believe, maybe even a little bit longer. Maybe open up to like 7 to 14, 15 weeks, depending on the severity of the rupture and how fast the individual heals. So Mitch out for the rest of the season, like you said, should be okay for the majority of the 2024/25 preseason. But his effort in this game was one that enshrined him in Origin folklore, I would suggest, after his heroics in Game 2 as well. Helped alongside a number of other inspirational efforts from Blues, spearhead New South Wales to a 14-4 victory. Like I said, just the third time in Origin history the Blues have gone up there and won a decider. I think 2005 with Joey Johns and that fabled individual effort was the last time. So Mitch, again, part of Origin history here. Bradman Best scoring one of the 2 tries in this game alongside Mitchell. 2 iconic tries for State of Origin, which will be big parts of promo packages moving forwards. Zach Lomax having a stellar night off the boot, smacking 3 important conversions, 2 from tries, 1 from a penalty. Then we had 2 penalty goals for Valentine Holmes, Jeremiah Nene and Cameron Murray both getting sin-binned as part of a big swirling fracas that saw those 2 players binned, saw Homoli Olakwatu suspended for joining the game from the sidelines, even though he was only just trying
in his suit.
And look, I'm not going to defend Homoli because you can't do that, but he was only trying to break up the fracas. He wasn't actually trying to instigate or further the fight, but you can't come in from the sidelines like that. But then there was a whole number of players copping contrary conduct charges from that one, but only fines for those players. Murray and Olakwatu facing 2 to 3 weeks on the sideline pending early guilty pleas or contesting the charges. Then we go to the rewards from this one, or awards from this one. Best on field was adjudged to be the fullback in Dylan Edwards, who I thought had a sensational game. Player of the series, and I don't think it was. I did say screw you, but it is a fair call because obviously wanted Mitch to get the sort of Billy Slater-esque 2 games man of the series effort, and he would have been close, but it went to Angus Crichton, who was phenomenal for the New South Wales Blues. And I think Angus, Moses, maybe even Stephen Crichton, he had probably had too quiet of a game in Game 3 to put him in there, but there was a number of Blues that it could have been. Cam Murray was very good as well. But yeah, the Blues securing a historic series win, one for the record books, one for, I think, just the memory or annals of memory and history there, because the heroic efforts from those players we just spoke about was huge. Mitch, obviously in Game 2, was one of the all-time Origin games for a playmaker. Backed that up with a very stoic performance with a huge kicking game that kept the Blues in a torrid contest, one of the most physical, prolonged physical encounters I've seen in Origin 60s for a long time, and then sealed the game with an iconic individual try in the 67th minute. There's a lot to talk about here, but where do you want to start?
Okay, well, first of all, from an overall series perspective, I don't think the Blues get the series win without the inclusion of both Mitch Moses and Dylan Edwards.
Fair.
I think they were instrumental in turning things around. There were, of course, other tweaks to the team, and everyone contributed. But my goodness, the performance of those 2, plus of course Angus Crichton, was just, it was series defining. It really was. So, shout out to all of those players. Real strong acknowledgement to them, and I think rightly so. Now, all of those players will have a part in Origin history as being members of a Blues team which managed to reverse what was a horror Game 1 and take the game back to, I think, levels that maybe it hasn't been for recent times. I don't know about you, John, but for the first time in a long time last night, I was actually in an Origin game yelling at the TV. I was getting pumped at different moments. I was, there was expletives coming out of my mouth. I was, there were just general you're kidding moments or gasps of breath at different things that was happening. Obviously, there was the the anger and the frustration when Moses got injured, and we were sending messages at that point. But I don't think I've ever been along for the Origin ride as much as I was last night. And I think the inclusion of Mitch Moses as a Parramatta player and Zach Lomax as a future Eels player, that obviously played its part in drawing me into the game. But the game itself, it just had so many explosive and fiery moments. It had the intensity that I'm finding it hard to remember games having. And I'll tell you what, the only disappointing part for me was the reaction after the game and the comments after the game from some of the Queensland, inverted commas, Origin greats. So the interview that Darren Lockyer did with Harry Grant would be one of the worst I've ever seen, because there was, look, some people might say he was wearing his heart on his sleeve. It wasn't even that. It was like he was talking like he was depressed about the thing, and I can understand that. But you got a job on television to do. Like, let's have some proper questions. I thought it was a very, very ordinary interview that he did, and I'm just trying to think, whether it was Wally Lewis or someone else? It might have been Paul Vorton, actually, and I don't know
about
the part.
Zach Lomax?
Commenting about that it was an ordinary game from the Queensland.
Okay. I think it might have been Vorton, and he went on to, I don't know if make fun's the right word, but less than graciously talk about Zach Lomax's issues of moving to the wing at the start of the season.
Yes. Yeah. Don't, you know what? Don't have the bloke on anymore. Look, he could be a great bloke. He was obviously a legendary Origin player, coached them in that crazy team when Super League was on. Was a big part of rugby league media during the footy show heyday. But comments like he was making, you just go, no, look, I'm sorry. You're not relevant. You're not. He should be able to be relevant. It's not like he's 90 years old, sitting in a nursing home. He's been involved with footy all his life. Someone like him should be able to make relevant comments. And I thought it was atrocious, that aspect. And you know what? And it's a tough thing to say, because, it's not an easy job being commentators or broadcasters. But if they can't get it right with the people that they've got as part of Origin, then, maybe Channel 9 shouldn't be doing it. We actually had a bit of a laugh last night about the commentary. Who does the commentary? Is it Matt Thompson? Is that
might be Matty Thompson? Yeah.
Yeah, when he said about Spencer Leniu with his tackle on Daly Cherry Evans, and he said Spencer couldn't help himself. DCE was forlorn on the ground.
Yeah.
All sad and lonely. And then as when I messaged you about it, laughing, and you said it was like reading like a smutty novel.
Yeah, a cheap smut novel. Good Lord. That was certainly one way to describe that situation. I wouldn't have gone with that, and I like to be colourful and flowery in my language sometimes when I'm doing updates. I wouldn't have gone with flying forlorn.
And maybe forlorn wasn't the word that he was looking for, but it was an amusing moment. I actually laughed out loud, and then I kept replaying it just to hear it time and time again, which was annoying Yoko no end. And I said it was like listening to Audible of a trashy novel. So that was a. I mean, look, I actually enjoyed that moment. I didn't mind a moment like that. It was funny. It brought some
exactly
to the game.
exactly.
So well done, Matty Thompson, with that. It was an enjoyable moment in the coverage. So, but yeah, mate. Apart from that, anything you want to add about the game?
I mean, yeah, you raised some interesting points there about the Queensland coverage. I wouldn't say it was like a masked off moment for them, but maybe they've become so used to winning Origin that there's a little bit of extra sodium in the composition now when they lose, because they did not look like it went down a treat. DCE getting booed when he was caught up to the stand at the post game. I don't know if that was because there was only New South Wales fans left in the ground or on the ground, and yeah,
I'd assume that was it, mate. It was I don't think Queenslanders are going to be booing their own in that circumstance.
You know, and Billy post game, I think the media overplayed in their headlines, but he was a bit frustrated by the refereeing and then New South Wales tactics of Reece Walsh. And, you know, again, Mitchell Moses got hammered off the ball a number of times that game.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And
I was just going to ask, did you have a problem with the officiating?
I just thought it was bad both ways. I thought that Queensland could have been called for a lot of grapple tackles.
Yes. And
New South Wales are the one team that did get caught for it, and it was a grapple tackle, don't get me wrong. But, you know, as we always say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And it felt like at the end they might have been guilty of trying to fish for a way to make the game close. That I've got a no try, but, you know, can you see if it's a penalty try sort of call? Maybe it was due process in terms of the context of, you know, the kick forwards, but New South Wales also had a big advantage downfield. I just thought it was pretty much an Ashley Klein refereeing performance. Like, both teams had bad calls go against them. Could have been more penalties blown, but it's State of Origin, so you have the commentators banging about how you got to let shoulder charges and high tackles go until they don't want them to let it go. So referees kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. I just thought New South Wales, both teams went at it hammer and tongs for the entire first half. New South Wales, in a reversal of what we've come to expect the State of Origin, they had the extra gear and Queensland didn't. They had the playmakers that created the opportunities. They had the forward pack that dug deep, and they had the fullback who shouldered the extra work when everyone else was fatiguing. And all those factors came together. You know, I thought Mitch Barnett coming into that game when Angus Crichton had a terrifying moment where he thought he might have hurt his neck badly, got thrown into the fire, came out, did some great defensive work. You know, all those guys, you know, Connor Watson came on late in the game and helped the Blues go up tempo. Everyone played their role. Almost everyone. But I don't want to put the boot in again. But Michael Maguire called an almost perfect series here for New South Wales. Any of the gripes that people had in game one were pretty much because of selection unavailabilities. But the one thing that I think he did get wrong was picking, you know, Jake Debojevic at prop, and I think that was reflective in the fact that he got 20 minutes in a game for a decider, which brought him just over 80 minutes for the entire series. So New South Wales was essentially playing every game with a man down on the bench because he was not coming back on to make an impact. But beyond that, Michael Maguire showed the power of common sense. Outside that one selection, he showed the power of common sense in State of Origin. He picked a team each game, again, considering who was available for game one and who wasn't available, that while you might have had a different preference for one guy in a given spot, like, say, centre, he was picking the 1A, 1B player in that position. And I think the Blues produced results reflective of that. He picked good teams, and those teams played good football. And we've seen New South Wales have some real harebrained selections in recent years and things that are contrary to both form. So you don't reward form when you need to reward form. You don't reward incumbency when you should be rewarding incumbency. You know, those little decisions there. He went out there and picked good teams, and I think New South Wales, again, the results speak for themselves. So well done to Madge. He caught a really, really good series as a rookie Origin coach, so he deserves his flowers for sure.
Yeah, and you could see how much it meant to the coaches up there in the box in those key moments when the cameras were showing that. But I agree with you about the selections. I would have liked to have seen Connor Watson come on a little bit earlier.
Yeah, it felt like Madge was trying to stagger that up against the injection of Callum Ponga. I agree that I thought Reece Robson played phenomenally in terms of his defense. I think he probably could have been subbed off 5, maybe 10 minutes faster. But yeah, again, Watson came on, had a big positive impact. So it's kind of hard to be too critical. But yeah, it was a really well called series. He got the right people in there that obviously cared a lot about the jersey. And some might say he out-Queenslanded the Queenslanders.
Yeah, now of course the selection that you and I have always differed on is Isaiah Yeo.
Hey, he had a good series. I think the difference is this series, prior to where he's been used in the past, Brad Fittler and other coaches tried to get him to be the Penrith lock at State of Origin, and that clearly wasn't working. Last couple of games, he went out there and played as a prop, and it made a huge difference to his impact. He actually had a really good series on the back of that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always waxed lyrical about Isaiah Yeo. He's been one of the players that I would have always loved the Eels to have secured. I think he was, and again, I don't want this to be a Jake Turbo pile-on, but you know, in the reality, Isaiah Yeo was captain for 2/3 of the Origin time this year. And it would have been nice to have seen him at the very least get up on the podium alongside Jake Trbojevic.
Yep.
Because he was the captain in far many more match minutes out there than what Jake was. And again, I don't want to have this as a pile-on with Jake because, you know, the thing is, Jake has simply been selected. We know Jake is a legend for his Manly team. He's their inspirational leader out at Manly. He's loved on the northern beaches. He's fated, and probably rightly so, as the nicest bloke in rugby league. He doesn't select himself in Origin. He obviously has great pride in that, and the coaches have always raved about what he brings in the preparation for the Origin team. But I think it was actually unfair in a way on Jake to name him captain and to only give him between, 20 and 30 minutes per game as the captain and starting prop. It's because what that does is it puts those minutes in the spotlight, doesn't it? And puts a focus on him in a negative way when he doesn't deserve, especially, in an Origin. I don't think he deserves to be in a negative way. So it's like, I think if Madge saw him for the value at the start of a game and then didn't see the value past the start of the game, if he wasn't made captain, you know what, we probably, may not be focusing on that on his game time as much. I mean, we might be then questioning, what's Madge doing with his bench rotation. But what we saw was that Madge actually got it right in terms of how he juggled those minutes. As unusual as they were, he got the best value out of the players for the time that they were out there on the field. So that's probably all I've got to say on that because, I feel like at times we've been a bit of a pile-on Jake, and I'm not, we've got our opinion that he is an exceptionally good club player, and at a representative level, we're not so sure, but he's part of a successful Blues team. He got to be the captain. I would have liked to have seen as captain. Isaiah Yeo getting time up on the podium as well at the end of the game because I thought he was, a big part of the leadership and obviously the on-field captain for most of the series. So anyway, I don't think there's probably anything more that we can add to the wrap-up of this. It's just that finally we can say it's good to be a Blue.
Yeah, well, just those 17 players, including Jake, I think you're probably going to find that they'll probably be sharing a lifelong bond now. That was a special series win. So, from the guys from Penrith, Edwards, not Crichton, he was from Penrith, but Luai are probably going to be as tight with the likes of Mitchell Moses, who has been a bitter, Western Sydney rival for years, as they're going to be for a lot of her other mates. So it's funny how Origin can create that sort of camaraderie, but a huge win for the Eels. And Eels for the Blues. And I got to say that, speaking of Jerome Law, I thought he had a great series. I've been very critical of him in recent years, but that was as a wholehearted and coming of age seems pretty disrespectful because he's always been a good NRL player. But as a wholehearted and well-rounded game or series of games I've seen him play, and I still think he's going to be overpaid by the Tigers because that is top of the market money that he got. But if he can play like that anywhere near consistently club level for them, then he'll probably be a good buy for him.
Oh, yeah. I look at their purchase of him in a different light now, because before this season, I just wasn't sure that he had the temperament or the game management skills to do what the Tigers need from a recruit in that position. But looking at how he combined with Mitch Moses,
it was so natural and easy between the two of them, wasn't it? They look like they've been playing together for years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to give the Tigers ideas with that either going forward. But it's, it said a lot. It said a lot, for both players, for where they're at in their respective careers, their maturity on the field. And, Jerome Luai has been much maligned, and for good reason.
Well,
absolutely for good reason.
It's not just for his on-field. Yeah, exactly. It's not just because of his on-field game that he's been in the headlines. He talks a lot of talk, is probably the way I'd put it. But he walked the walk this year.
Oh, yeah. And just that quality, consistently good quality football that he's produced this year. You just have to give him a massive congratulations on what he's achieved. And we've already mentioned a couple of the others like Dylan Edwards and Stephen Crichton. Some of these blokes that were the mainstay, but the pack, we looked at it and you maybe wondered whether we were some props short or if there was anything lacking. Well, no, they more than did their job, the forwards in this series. So
and to wrap it up, big fella, the full fall out of this game. Obviously, Mitchell Moses out for the season. Dylan Edwards has a suspected posterior cruciate ligament strain or rupture, which could see him out for 2 to 4 weeks. There is an ankle injury to Patrick Carrigan, which I have not seen any update on for a timeline. So I don't know if it's a minor one or a major one. And then you have the following players charged. Kurt Capewell has 2 charges from the first 14 minutes for a dangerous throw on Stephen Crichton and a dangerous contact on Mitchell Moses, facing 2 fines. And then after that, every player is being charged for the fracas, which means that Jeremiah Nane, Brian To'o, Ruben Cotter, Cam Murray, Hamiso Tabuafido, Matt Burton, Felice Kafusi, Hamala Olakau'atu and Payne Haas all charged, but of them, only obviously the aforementioned Murray and Olakau'atu getting suspensions. Everyone else getting some degree of match fee fine. And for Olakau'atu, he can't get a match fee fine, so that's probably part of the reason why he got suspended.
What was that for him? For the group, was it something like 10 players and 11 charges? Is that what it came in at?
Something like that, yeah. So, and honestly, more players could have been charged for that, I reckon, but they've been very light-handed with that. And then the other one, probably the most notable one, not charged, was Reece Walsh after making dangerous contact of Stephen Crichton's head in a potential try-scoring situation. So that one escaping any further charge, so Walsh probably a little bit lucky there. But that puts the wraps on a historic Origin Series 60s, Blues prevailing 2-1. Definitely one of the best series we've seen in recent times. And like you said, the most invested I've been in as a neutral in a long time. So well done to both states for putting on a great show. And it's certainly...
And can I also say as well, I think it's a good thing there wasn't a match review committee back in the old days of Origin.
yeah.
The number of all-ins that were
and
there.
And cheap shots that were allowed to get away with. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my God. Yeah,
exactly.
Like, in all honesty, if they were able to find 11 charges out of a game where it never got too much more than pushing and shoving, they would have had 34 players up on charges after every Origin game.
And I'm just grateful that no one ran into Ashley Quine last night, so we avoided any controversy with that. So we put the final wraps up on State of Origin. Really enjoyable series. Blues prevailing. Obviously, historical effort from them. We now move on to some Parramatta football. No NRL this week. The boys have the bye, a much-needed bye, given how banged up we are. And I think we do get some reinforcements coming out of this week, which we'll deal with in the next preview podcast and news podcast. Not that it's going to be huge reinforcements, but anyway, we move on to round 20, where the Eels are in action in 3 grades, which is Jersey Flegg, New South Wales Cup, and Harvey Norman Women's Premiership. Let's start with the Flegg 60s, because they're part of a doubleheader out of Belmore tomorrow on Friday. 6 o'clock p.m. kickoff in the 21s. Eels looking to continue to build off a really good series of wins now, but they're taking on the top-placed Bulldogs, who have surpassed the Raiders as the form team of this competition. So Eels look like this: at fullback, Upper Twiddle; on the wings, Muhammad Alamuddin and Oliver McCarthy. Wing partners being the centres is Antioch Faitala Mariner and Araz Namba. In the halves, Maddie Hunter and Joshua Lynn. Front row, Sam Tuivasa, Tinkin Brown, they're the props. Riley Smith at dummy half. Raf Destratus and Tyrese Lakini are on the edges. Saxon Pryke is a lock forward. Yaya Ayachi, Max Tupou, Damascus Nemia, and Josiah Funarayuta are on the interchange. Michael Abdo is the reserve. And yeah, they're taking on a very good Dogs outfit. Looking at players we might know: Mitchell Woods, this year's State of Origin halfback. Larry Mwanga Tutia, who's a former Parramatta Eel. There's Elijah Matteelli. Who else do I know from this one here? Alex Conti, I know of from SG Ball. Fanafo Sevi, big unit who also plays State of Origin, I believe. So you can see why the Dogs are pretty highly seated. They've got some good talent across the forward pack, spine and backline. But Eels, they're riding into this one cresting a pretty good wave of momentum. What do you make of the Eels lineup, and how they're going to go about getting a must-have victory given their position on the ladder and the amount of games left this season?
Yeah, well, we've got Upper Twiddle. He's certainly been flitting between the fullback and halves role this year. He's been probably one of the most consistent players. Moe Alamuddin, back from what was I thought a really good individual performance in the New South Wales Cup last week, getting a try and a try assist and making some really good contact in some defensive moments as well that he was called on. Good yardage. So I don't think we could have asked too much more from him individually last week. Faitala Marin, I think he has been maybe revelation's too much of a strong word, but he's also brought some strike power out there to the backs. We've seen Araz Nanva last year as well as this year. He's been very consistent. Oliver McCarthy, mate, like his elevation from the SG Ball to this squad over the last couple of weeks, he's going great guns out there on the wing. Matthew Hunter had a very good game last week. Josh Lynn, well, he's probably been a player that they've missed from time to time when he's been called up to New South Wales Cup. He brings a lot of class to the team. Then you've got a really strong pack this week. Sam Tuivasa, everyone knows quite well from his stint in the 19s Origin team. He's been a Eels Junior Rugby League Player of the Year for the district in the past. Tinkin Brown, he's been hard to stop this year. He's really a threat close to the line as well for opposing teams. Raf Destratus, I'm just trying to think which one was injured, which one was suspended out of the Twins last week, but Raf is playing this week. Maybe Dom was the one that picked up the injury.
Yeah, I'd say that Raf was the suspended player and Dom the injured one.
Yeah.
That's a bit of odd twin magic there, isn't it, for rugby league? You don't usually have them both missing for different reasons like that.
Yeah, Tyrese Lakini, we're getting to see a bit more of Tyrese. He returned to rugby league this year after missing last year, I think, with his studies and workload with playing rugby, I think, for Kings. Saxon Pryke, he's got a bit of New South Wales Cup time last week. He's back in Jersey Flegg, a player of great promise. And, of course, I omitted talking about Riley as part of the pack, but Riley Smith has been probably the driving force in the performances this year from the Jersey Flegg team. He'd have to be the fittest player out there on the field. They've used him in the halves as well as a dummy half. He's had time up in New South Wales Cup. He's done exceptionally well. And then we look at the bench. Ayarchi, we're familiar with him from Pathways, and he's done a good job in the times he's been called up. And again, we look at another couple of Pathways boys in Max Tupu and Josiah Funa Ayutu. And Damascus Nemia has also been someone that we weren't familiar with really before this season.
Queensland recruit.
Yeah. So another player that's doing particularly well. So look, we look at the team and we go, all of these boys have had strong moments this season, and I guess there's been, well, they're not guess. I mean, they're obviously paying the penalty for the start to the season, because in reality, with how the team has been playing, they should be playing finals football in this grade. They probably won't be, because it's just been too big a mountain for them to climb. But it would have been good to have seen how far they could have gone in finals football if they got off to a better start in the season. Now, that said, who knows what they might be able to do against the Bulldogs? Who knows whether that means that they are a chance when you get into the last week or two of sneaking into the top six? I mean, we don't know. All they can do is turn up each week, perform to their best, and see where it takes them. But we have seen some very, very good football from them this year. Last week, I thought their first half was really strong, almost exceptional. If they'd have iced every try-scoring opportunity, I would have said exceptional. Their second half, not so much, but they still got the win. So let's see. Look, I mean, the Dogs are sitting on the top of the table for a reason. It will be a tough ask. Without watching too much of the Dogs play this year, it's hard to give a realistic tip on this. Maybe realistic is the wrong word, but an accurate assessment of what's likely to happen in the game from the Bulldogs' perspective. We know a few of those faces that are there. We know they've got strong players in the team. We know the team has been getting the results. I'd like to think the Eels can get 2 points out of this and continue to keep the flame flickering for their hopes for finals football.
Yeah, Eels coming to this round on 18 points, chasing the West, assuming that it's a top six, because that's what we're taking as our new final structure, but it could be a top five. If it's a top five, it's near impossible. But they're 2 wins behind the West Tigers right now, who occupy 6th place. So if it's a top five, they're 3 wins behind the Seagulls. There's next to no chance that happening. But 2 wins behind the West Tigers is an outside chance. So get that win this week, and we wait and see what happens from there.
And can we just say as well, they thumped Manly when they played them, and they should have defeated the Tigers, had a massive lead early in the season in the run of losses. And you only have to take 2 points off them, give 2 points to us.
Monster swing on the ladder, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, yep. Okay, we move on, mate.
Move on. So let's go to the New South Wales Cup, because it is part of a doubleheader here out of Belmore Sports Ground. And this one you can catch on New South Wales Rugby League TV if you have a subscription or the free trial available. We'll also be running some updates on TCT as well, so you can join the conversation on our website. Eels looking to bounce back from a horror horror second half against the New Zealand Warriors. Coming to this game in 9th place, taking on the 5th place Bulldogs. They've got this lineup with the NRL on the bye. There's been some loosely used terms, reinforcements here, but they do have some holes in the back line still. Zach Sini is at fullback. Lorenzo Mulatalo comes back to this grade to play on one wing with Isaac Lumi on the other. Samuel Luizio is the lone centre named. There is a vacant centre spot there. Let me just check if the club has actually put out a team list officially yet. They have not. So no team list from the club this week. It's all just New South Wales Rugby League. So a vacant centre spot there, 60s, but you quickly suggested to me on Team List Tuesday that it would most likely be filled by Jake Tungor. I think that's a pretty solid shout. The Eels do have other options too if they want to bring up a younger player from Flegg, but Jake Tungor makes a lot of sense there. Although, given our backline stocks, there is a question of how much do we need to start protecting some of these players too from injury risk, because with the loss of Mitchell Moses, that's another backline reshuffle in the NRL next week.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Look, I'm not sure myself now whether Tungor is going to be involved in this. So, in fact, I'd almost completely retract that at this stage.
Yeah,
I don't think he will.
Yeah, it's
so,
now a very good chance that the Eels reach for either one of their depth options in Ron Massey, or they can go to the Jersey Flegg, bring back in someone like Moe Alamadine, and then move, I'd say, looking at the Cup roster here, probably move, I think Lumi's played centre for us in the Cup before. Put him into the centres maybe, or I suppose more Talo as well. But that's definitely something up in the air right now. In the halves, though, we know these two, they've been the pairing for most of the season in Dejan Arce and Ethan Sanders. Again, though, do one of them get pulled potentially for protection for next week, given that Mitchell Moses is out, or do the Eels go for a different configuration in the NRL, which means they're less prone to protecting one of these two? Who knows? But,
and of course, don't rule out Dan Keir being shifted to centre.
Yes, Dan Keir could absolutely go into the centres, yeah.
You know, someone else, another forward comes in. So
put Jock Brazel into the starting lineup.
Jock Brazel
recall Saxon Pryke or Reece Alderton not available here, so I'm not sure if that's injury or suspension, but there's options there. But speaking of forwards, Woody McGregor is in one prop position, Makahesi Makatoa the other. Matty Arthur starts at dummy half, so he comes back from NRL after getting some limited minutes against the Gold Coast Titans. Speaking of Dan Keir, he's on the edge as the captain right now, with Matt Dury coming back to this grade to play on the other side. Brock Parker locks the forward pack. In the interchange, you see Joey Lussick, Jock Brazel, Ofiki Ogden and Tony Matteoli making their returns from very long layoffs. Ogden tearing a pec or a bicep, a pec I believe, way back earlier in the season. And then Tony Matteoli having lingering issues, well beyond lingering actually, long-term issues of a hammy that has kept him out of play for months now. So good to have those two boys back in the fold, boosting the pack. But the Eels taking on the Bulldogs, and these two teams met at the start of the year 60s. We talked about those horror starts for the Eels in both the Flegg and Cup. And the Cup, if we go all the way back to round one, if I can press the buttons correctly, which is sometimes dubious, Eels losing 38-36 at Combank Stadium this one. It was a seesawing battle. Samuel Luizio scoring 5 tries in this case, with Sanders and Lumi also tacking on there, but the Dogs getting by on goal kicking. Toby Sexton out kicking Ethan Sanders 5 from 7 versus 4 from 7. This was I'm not sure if thrilling and pulsating is the way I would describe it so much as just a seesawing manic game. But the Eels showed they had plenty of attacking prowess, but just gave away a lot of easy possession. So they know they can beat the Bulldogs, and they can mix it with any team we've seen in this big run. Even last week where they were thumping the Warriors before completely going to sleep. The question is, how do they bounce back from that capitulation last week? Because that is a kind of slide that can mentally break a team, or it could make them if they bounce back from it.
I found it hard to comprehend what I watched last week. I walked out of Lidcombe Oval, as I think I said to you. I'd been down that path before, trudging out of Lidcombe back in the 80s when the Eels were even winning titles, and just coming out on the wrong side of the scoreboard against Western Suburbs. So to go to Lidcombe Oval and to see the capitulation that we saw against the Warriors, Now, because the Warriors were well placed in this grade, but unless people watched it, you can't get a real sense of how things flipped completely in the second half. Like the scoreboard tells that story of 28-4 flipping around to becoming 46-28, but the Eels were so dominant. The try that the Warriors got in the first half was really against the run of play.
Mm-hmm.
I think we left a try or two out there, even on the first half, for 28-4 scoreboard. I know we bombed a couple of tries early in the second half as well, which could well have completely changed or stopped the momentum that the Warriors had. But the bad thing about last week was that by the time the Warriors had simply scored their first two tries and the score was about 28-16, the heads were starting to go down. The body language was just not good at all. It was the old teapot stance, the hands on the hips, and heads down. It was, you don't understand why you see that when a team is still got a 12-point lead. And that just did not. I literally knew we were gone at that point. I thought, they don't believe they can win this now. Like they actually now look like they're prepared for a loss, and it just the ease with which they got split open time and time again, the sorts of gaps and missed tackles that weren't in evidence in the first half were suddenly there in abundance in the second half. I don't know how they bounced back from that. I mean, we saw them bounce back from an awful game against the Raiders, where it was like every single player in the team had their worst game for the season in the one game. But the conditions were awful, and there's no, that's not an excuse because there were two teams out there. But it was just an awful game of football all round, like from both teams that day. What we saw last weekend, it's hard to find words for it. Look, 42-0 in the second half, that says enough, really. So I don't know how they bounce back. I have to be perfectly honest. I look at the team and I go, okay, you should be able to acquit yourselves far better. But it's really the space between the years that's going to determine how they go this week. They've had, look, we've gone on endlessly about the injury woes for the NRL team. Well, that gets reflected in the New South Wales Cup because they're, if you're the lower grades when the first graders missing players, you're going to be probably even worse off because you've got enough change that happens on a weekly basis anyway without the pressure of a full casualty ward. And, again, where are their heads at after last week? I don't know. I honestly can't tip this, John, because I just don't know what Eels team will turn up this week. I hope they turn it around. And if you compared the Eels at the start of the year and how much their form would fluctuate during a game, you then go, well, we saw that again last weekend. So who knows? They could lose at 38-36. They could win at 38-36. I'm not going to make a tip on that one. I can't. Not based on last week.
Look, Matt Arthur's a big in here. I think he'll help galvanise the attack to be far more consistent and lethal. But in saying that, like you said, there could be some serious psychological damage done from last week because they had not only a huge win in the hands, pretty much cashing the check at the bank, but also potentially a foot into the finals in terms of ladder seeding. And now that they're looking back on the outside in, so going to be very.
Well, you're right. I mean, Budsy Arthur is a big inclusion. I think Matt Dury is a big inclusion with the team. It would be nice to know what is actually happening at centre But if they're fit, Ogden and Matteelli are great players to have on the bench, and Jock Brazel has been in really good form since being elevated up to New South Wales Cup. So look, there are positives I can find about the team. And I don't think Zaxini's going to have the sort of troubles that he had last week with his hands, because he's normally really quite safe in that regard. And it was two, horror moments at the start of the second half with dropping a kick and then losing the ball in contact, and the Warriors scored 2 tries to get the ball rolling. He's been one of the most consistent performers in New South Wales Cup this year. So he's probably going to have a better game. But, you also have to think the team is going to be suffering this like a flow on from what's happening with first grade. Because if you're a New South Wales Cup player and the first grade keeps getting beaten as they are, if you're not being selected in first grade, for whether your thinking is right or wrong in that regard, it's human nature that you're going to be thinking, will I get a run? Well, why am I not getting a run? And there might be a few players that maybe are thinking that. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But it's just a tough season in that regard. When your first grade team's travelling like ours are, it's not going to necessarily be any better for the New South Wales Cup team unless they're consistently winning. And we're seeing a team that the form has fluctuated just too much during the year in New South Wales Cup. So anyway, we press on, mate.
Yes, and speaking of pressing on, that takes us to the final fixture this weekend in the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership. Eels looking to bounce back from a 6-point loss to the, I suppose, sister club of our competitors this week. Losing against the Dragons last week, playing the Steelers this week in the Gong Collegiate Sporting Complex, 3 o'clock kickoff, Sunday the 21st. Eels have a number of changes here because of that NRLW trial that sort of clashed with the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership last week, 60. So they've got a revamped roster that looks like this. At fullback, Yasmin Baker, Debbie Dwahi, and Caitlin Pearden on the wings. Caitlin moving from centre to wing this week. In the centres, it's Kate Fallon and Aaliyah Harmano. Halves, Talara Bambut and Sarah Dimmick, so stability there for the Eels in the playmaking ranks. Front row sees Aliti Namose. Sorry, Aliti, if I got that wrong. With Tafawa Asua as the other bookend. Chelsea Makira is the dummy half, as she has been for the prior 2 games. Chloe Jackson and Captain Talisha Maeva are the edge back rowers. Riverly Arlaw, another very talented Tasha Gow prospect coming up to this grade to start at lock forward this week. Well done to River. Had a great 19s Origin game as well. On the interchange, you got Rafaela Perigo, Lasalio Sita Payne, Raishi Farmasili, and Ashley Pottinger. Extended roster, Liana Dimmick, Fontaine Tafua, Caitlin Stanley, Bella Sanford, Shay Shipton, and Tahila Vawalanga. So the Eels making some moves across the park there, except for the spine, both the pack and the front. Sorry, the pack and the back line. Goodness, having a couple of changes there. 60s. What do you make of it? And how do you reckon they match up against the Steelers? Who again, I'm just trying to see if anyone stands out there. We've got a Paseka, Caitlin Moran. We know of. Anyone else? Tori Shipton. I wonder if any relation to Al Shipton. Shay does come from that area, I believe. So I wonder if that's a sister between Corey and Shay there. Anyone else I don't recognise there? Not off the top of my head, but
so the Yos that are there.
Sienna Yo, yes, and then Zali Yo.
Which one was? There was one of them was actually outstanding in the halves. I think, for Illawarra.
Yeah, it was Sienna. She looked phenomenal when we saw her play Tasha Gow. I think, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was 2023.
Yeah, 2023. She looked like absolute class above playing Tasha Gale. But she's on the interchange here for the Steelers, not starting in the halves. So be interesting to see how she is utilised, because maybe it was just like a red-hot run of form. But when we saw her in the Tasha Gale, she looked like a surefire NRLW prospect.
Yeah. And obviously she's young, and this is all part of her journey.
Development, exactly.
Yeah, I wonder whether she's coming back from injury or anything like that. She's wearing the number 20 jersey. But look, you mentioned there are changes to the team. I'm not sure who's going to do the kicking actually, John, because we've got Bella Sanford on the extended
He's dropped out
reserves
of the
list.
team, so
Yeah, and Alicia Bell's not part of the extended squad even this week. So I'm not sure what's happening there. But the goal kicking was problematic last week. It was, I think we were one from three, I think, last week. It was probably a week where if they'd have landed the goals, it would have kept them a little bit closer. And especially there was a kick towards the end which hit the crossbar, and not too far. It wasn't a long distance kick. It's just, having kickers in women's rugby league who are able to kick the ball from distances like out near the sideline. It's not common. There are some exceptionally good kickers. Alicia Bell is one of those. We've seen her land some amazing goals from the sideline, but there aren't too many specialist kickers in women's rugby league, and teams that do have someone in the team who can turn 4 points into 6 on a regular basis. And that basically means anyone who's able to land a goal from about 15 metres wide of the posts out to the sideline, they're worth their weight in gold, really, for being able to go up, in batches of 6 rather than in batches of 4. So I'm not sure who's going to be kicking in that lineup. I'm trying to recall whether any of those Pathways girls have taken kicks before. I don't know if Talara Bamblett ever was kicking, or Debbie Dewey.
I think Debbie did some goal kicking during the year, but I certainly wouldn't list her as a specialist. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Eels fare in that regard and whether it's going to cost them, because we spoke about it there, the importance of having a specialist goal kicker. It's huge at any level, but especially in the women's pathways right now.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, look, last week was a game that was allowed to get out of their grasp, because I said it before when we did our review of the weekend's round, that they were against the Dragons. The Eels presented a far greater attacking threat, looked far more dangerous with the ball in hand, but errors were just so high. It continually invited the Dragons back into the game, and there was 2 to 3 mistakes in possession where I'm talking about penalties in possession, like for incorrect play the balls. So they were just, I think they ran the gamut of the types of mistakes that could be made in a game. It was one of those games.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can eliminate that this week, they'll go a long way towards securing victory. Looking at the Steelers, they started off with a narrow loss in their first game of the season, and I think must have followed that up with a big victory, because I think they're about 40 points, I think, in their differential, something like that. So yes, they would have had a big victory last week. Just let me double check who they were playing against last week, because it was, let's see. The West Tigers. So they had a 50-6 victory over the West Tigers. If the Steelers are carrying not carrying, but if they are fielding a lot of the girls who have been in their Tasha Gale team for the last 2 years,
It's going to be a
they are
formidable.
going to be a formidable opponent.
Yep. Yeah, the Steelers have always had very good pathways towards the NRLW, so it's going to be a good test for the Eels, especially going to Collegians, the road trip, and trying to bounce back from a narrow loss to the Dragons, and having that bit of change across the park as the team sort of settles into its best form between injuries and suspensions potentially as well. So we're still getting a feel for this group of girls, and hopefully they can get the win and then head into round 4 with 2 wins and a loss to their name, and sitting close to the top of the ladder as well, because they come to this round 5th, and a win would put them up towards the sort of top 3, top 4.
Yeah, look, I'm hopeful that they can maximise the time that Raf Perigo is out there on the field. She is a real talent. She is a real talent. Just watching the way that she reads the play, the way that she combines her running game with her passing game. I will not be surprised that that she becomes a star at NRLW level. She missed an entire season a couple of years back in Tasha Gale, and so that was the 2022 season. I think she had an injury for the entire year. We saw her walking the sidelines and on sideline duty with the basically where the players were filling in as ball girls, ball boys, ball girls in junior reps, and she got back on the field in this season. So sorry, it was not 2022; it's 2023. I have to get the seasons right and not think that when they go into New South Wales Cup, into New South Wales Women's Premiership level, that it's another year. And it's the same year as this year. So she missed last year, and then she got back on the field this year with Tasha Gale. I don't know about you, John, but I thought she was exceptional in her play. She was a standout in the Tasha Gale team, and I think she's brought that at this level in what I saw last week. And hopefully she gets lots of game time off the bench this week. We know what a lot of these Eels forwards are capable of. We got some girls there that in the team as well that are part of the NRLW squad as well. So let's hope that the errors are minimised and they can get the job done. So if they can get a victory down in Wollongong against an Illawarra team that we know has been traditionally strong, then they can be very, very pleased with themselves.
Yep. Yeah, well said, mate. And on that note, let's begin to wrap things up on another episode of the Tip Sheet. Whether you genuinely enjoy content or you're an avid hate listener, thank you for putting up for us for another hour of rambling and prattling on.
Should we do some shout-outs, mate, or we just leave that?
Well, we'll save that for when things get real dire in terms of content, because the Eels are struggling with 50 more injuries and whatnot. But like I said, whether you like us or not and you've persevered, I don't know why you'd be listening if you don't like listening to us, but they're out there. Thank you for stopping by and giving us your time. Speaking of thanks, another thank you to our sponsors and star partners, Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta. Couldn't do this entire series of shenanigans without them. So much love to Greg and the crew out there. Big fella, it's an abbreviated weekend, only 3 games in action, but we're still going to be out there cheering on the Eels. So on that note, I'll let you sign off in signature fashion.
Yeah, whenever the Eels are in action, there's only one thing to say: go you mighty Eels.